Chapter 10. Previously.
Hello, Your Majesty.
One of them said.
Elders.
He whispered in shock. Ariana, POV. After that, everything happened so fast. The one who had black eyes turned to gold as Alistair fell on the ground. Alistair! I screamed as I ran by his side.
I'm okay.
He said, his voice strained. Is this the human you fell in love with? One of them, surprisingly a woman, said as she let down her hood. She looked at me from top to bottom and hummed. Mommy? I heard my boy's voice as my head whipped to the door. My son was looking at everyone, rubbing his eyes to escape from the sleepiness. Baby, come to mommy, fast, I said as he nodded and ran to me. But one of the people in the hood caught him by the arm. Mommy! He shouted as the man dragged him to the rest of the men who looked at the boy, shocked. Is he your son, my king? The woman asked, looking at Noah with wide eyes. I looked at Alistair as he glared at the arm which tightly held my baby's wrist.
Let go of his hand.
He grunted. His body was stiff and sweating as he stood on his knees. The elders looked at him as if they were curious about what he will do.
I order you to let go of my son. You may be the Elder Council, but I am still the king. Try hurting my son and I will kill each one of you.
He said, as I watched his eyes shined bright blue. The whole room was giving about a powerful suppression. The man who was holding him in a spell seems to be struggling and breathing hard. I watched as another person's eyes also shined gold as if joining to help the one struggling. But it seems like he also finds it hard to keep Alistair down. Suddenly, a scream filled the air as I saw my son run to me. I looked at the man who was holding my son. He was on his knees, tied by a glowing blue rope.
It's too early for the child to have powers,
he said, struggling. Confused, I turned to look at my son who was hugging, making me gasp. I watched in shock as I saw my son's eyes shine bright blue. It was similar to Alistair, except it was a little lighter. I froze, not knowing what to go. My son. He is also one of them. What am I to do? He was hugging and crying, and I wanted to comfort him, but I don't know if I can. I feel frightened of all of this. This is just too overwhelming. Mommy, why are you pushing me away? He shouted as I looked down in shock. I grasped as I saw myself unconsciously pushing him away. I'm sorry, baby, I shouted as I hugged him. Whatever he is my son, my baby. I will be with him no matter what. Mommy, save Daddy, he said, as I looked at Alistair. Now his whole body was glowing bright blue. All the people in the hoods were now trying to restrain him. Your Majesty, please calm down. We will not hurt your son or the Queen, the woman shouted, but Alistair didn't hear it. It was as though he was in his own world. He was looking weak and exhausted. He was looking on the verge of exhaustion, but at the same time, powerful.
Majesty, listen to us. We will not harm them. We were just doing our duty.
Another one shouted, his voice filled with pain.
No one harms my family,
he said, his voice rougher but also exhausted. My queen, please calm him down, the woman shouted as I looked at her in shock. What? How? I asked back. Mommy, go to Daddy. Comfort him, Noah said as I looked at him. I stared at him, his eyes still glowing blue, holding the guy in those glowing rope. What are you saying, Noah? He is out of control. He will hurt us, I said as he shook his head. No, Mommy. Daddy won't hurt us. Daddy won't hurt me, and he won't hurt Mommy, too. He loves us both, he said determinedly. I stared at him before sighing. All right, but you stay here, I said as he nodded. Hesitantly, I moved towards him. I raised my shaking hand and grabbed his sleeve. Alistair, please stop, I said, but he was not responding. I looked at my son as he looked at me with determination. What should I do? Should I hug him or something? I mean, he said he loves me, but it sounds like some princess fairy tale. I stared at him as I saw his face become paler and paler. My heart clenched at the sight before me. I want nothing more to save him. A tear fell down his eyes and I lifted my hand to wipe it off. I felt him shudder, making the bright light around him glitch a little. I stared in shock before looking down at my hand. I don't know why I did it, but I suddenly grabbed his face in between my hands and stood in front of him. Alistair, please stop, I begged, looking at his eyes. I saw an emotion pass through his eyes as he stared back at me. He lowered his raised hand as the glow dimmed down. I gasped as he quickly pulled me to a hug, his face buried in my neck. He took a deep breath through his mouth, and I shivered as I felt his lip brushed my neck. I wrapped my hand around him, and we stood there a few seconds. I felt a tug on my skirt, and I looked down to see my baby looked at us. Alistair immediately picked him up and kissed his cheek, making the younger giggle. I watched it as I felt my heart feel warm. I never thought it will come to the day when my baby gets the feeling of having a father.
Your Majesty,
The people called Alistair. They were on the ground still, catching their breath.
the matter is between you and me, Council. I am responsible for breaking the order, and I'm ready to accept the consequence as per our noble writings. But it only involves me. Don't involve them in.
He said, as the council nodded their head.
We understand, my king, but she is the Queen of Obsidian, and your son, the next heir. They are expected to live in the kingdom with you. Besides, your son hold the Blessed Mark. He will be just as powerful as you. Without proper training, he is a danger to himself and others.
One of them said, pointing at my son's birthmark below his ears. Alistair nodded his head and turned towards me. I gulp as I looked at him. I know what he is going to say.
Come with me, please. I can protect you and take care of you both. Our son needs his father too. I know I was not around during his birth or 4 years after that, but I will try to compensate for those times, become the perfect father for our son.
He pleaded. The words I knew he would say. I felt my heart swell with pride as my eyes immediately went to my son. He was looking at me with expectation. He looked so eager to be with his father. Should I go with him? I don't know. I feel fear in my heart. The guy who kidnapped us said he was avenging on Alistair. Alistair seems to have a lot of enemies, and these powers. I don't know anything about them. But my son wants his father. Not to mention he also has his father's powers. I don't know what to do with the powers. What if it goes out of control? I don't know anything, and only his father can help him. My head hurts as I stared at them. My brain felt like it was going to explode with all the new information and unanswered questions. Mommy, please, my son said as he looked at me. His eyes were filled with tears, making my heart break. He needs his father, and I can't be selfish. My son is more important. We will come, I said, as I saw Alistair looked at me shocked. Really? My son shouted happily as he ran to me. I picked and hugged him as he kissed my cheek.
Thank you.
Alistair said as I looked at him and nodded. There is no turning back now. Chapter 11. Ariana POV. I sat on the broken couch awkwardly at Alistair's intense gaze. It's being almost half an hour. The so-called Elder Council has left the place, giving us time till tomorrow midnight to go to their place. I have put Noah to sleep in his bedroom, which to my luck was not destroyed. Alistair had also put a protection spell around the house, making me feel a bit at ease. I wanted to ask him what he was and where we were going, because from the talk between Alistair and the men in hoods, there was a lot of talking about kingdoms and dungeons as if they are characters in some fairy tale. But the one that came out of my mouth was the question I was longing to ask him for a long time. Are you really Noah's father? I asked, as he looked at me in shock. He stared at me with his blue enchanting eyes before slowly nodding.
I am.
He said as he looked at me with pleading eyes. Then why did you leave him? I asked, my face void of emotion.
I'm sorry, Arya. I didn't know you were carrying our child.
He said, as I felt a sting in my heart. So you would have stayed if you knew I was carrying a child? I asked, as he nodded, muttering a yes. Are we a one-night stand or something? I asked, as his eyes widened with shock.
What? No. How can you even think of it like that?
He shouted. Well, I don't remember you at all, and you yourself just said now that if you had known I was having your baby, you would have stayed for him. So what am I to guess? I asked him, glaring. My stupid heart is feeling hurt that he told he would only be here because of Noah alone. It is making me feel really angry and confused.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I meant I wouldn't have left you here alone, and would have taken you with me to Obsidian.
He said, standing up. Because I have your child, I said, folding my hand over my chest.
No, because you were at your most vulnerable moment. I should have stayed by your side at your hardest times and help you through every step. I should have to be there to fulfill your craving. I should have been there when you give birth.
He said, sitting on the chair with his hands on his head. There was silence in the air, and I watched as he stayed in his position, cursing himself. Why don't you tell me who you are? I said, trying to avoid the topic. Somehow seeing him hurt made me feel sad and miserable. He looked up, his sad blue eyes searching my brown ones.
To start with, my name is Alistair Regmore. I am a white wizard and the king of Obsidian Terrain.
He said as he bowed his head like in some traditional greeting. So my son is also a wizard? I asked, as he nodded.
Yes, he is a wizard, and the next heir to my throne.
He said as I sighed, not liking the sound of it. It's too much responsibility to him, but somehow deep down, I knew he will become a great ruler.
Our land of Wizard is in a different dimension from Earth. There, the land is divided into two. The Obsidian terrain, which is the land of white wizards, and the Zoldian terrain, the land of the dark wizards.
He said, and stopped waiting for me to grasp the information.
The Obsidian and Zoldian have always been enemies, but 100 years ago, after a destructive war, the two had entered into a peace treaty. But 7 years ago, the Dark King ruler suddenly attacked us, and ever since then, we are at war.
He continued. Were the people who kidnapped us one of the Dark Wizards? I asked, as he nodded.
Yes. The one who kidnapped you was Dark King Azivir. My General Vicus tried to save you, but he was too late.
He said, as I sighed. But why now? I mean, it's being 7 years. I asked, confused.
I don't know what happened, but I suddenly felt a large amount of power. Something triggered Noah's power, and it was turned to a signal, making us feel his presence.
He said, frowning. Something triggered his power, I said, before my eyes widened. The car accident, I said, as he looked at me confused. The day before I was kidnapped, I dreamt of a car accident. Just before I lost my conscience, I saw a bright blue light engulf us. But the dream felt so real. I could even feel the pain, I said, as his eyes widened.
Of course. If he had to release such strong energy, the spell he uses should be just as powerful. He must have used the time travel spell. But the spell is too powerful and hard. Arya, have you ever seen him use his power before?
He asked, as I shook my head. No, today was the first time I am seeing him do magic, I said, as he nodded.
He is more powerful than I thought.
He said, before looking at me. He stood up from the couch and walked to me. I watched as he smiled at me and sat next to me. I scooted a little away from him, curious what he will do next. He then took my hand and kissed it while staring into my eyes.
Do not worry, my queen. From now on, I will be with you through every step. I will try my best to be the perfect father for Noah and the perfect husband for you.
He said, taking out a beautiful ring as my eyes widened. Husband? I will not marry you, I said as I stood up abruptly.
Why?
He asked, confused, standing up. I don't know you. And if you really think I will marry you because I am your son's mother, then forget it. I am only doing this for my baby boy. Only for him. I know he needs his father, and I won't be selfish to destroy his happiness. But that doesn't mean I accept you in my life. As cliché as it sounds. I want to marry a man I love, I said, glaring at him.
But I am your love,
he said, as I huffed. Yeah, right. Then how come I don't remember you? I asked, as he sighed and looked down.
I was forced to leave you. I didn't mean to. I promise.
He started to say, but I raised my hand, stopping him from going further. Excuse me. I need to go and sleep. You can use my room. I will be sleeping with Noah, I said, walking to the bedroom, ignoring him. I walked to Noah's room and lay down beside him. I am only doing this for you, my love, I said, kissing his forehead before falling into a deep sleep.